My name is Carly, and I am a program manager here with Junior Achievement of North Florida. I'm here today because I am inspired and focused on making sure you feel prepared as a high school student for the world of work. Today, we're going to be focusing on interviewing for a job, making sure that you have the interpersonal skills needed to present yourself well to a potential employer during an interview. So, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, the average American holds 10 different jobs before they're 40, and that number is expected to even increase. So, when you consider that you're not going to be selected for every single job you apply for, you know that you're going to fill out a lot of applications and resumes and interviews. So, to help make sure you are set up to get the job that you want, it's so important to do it right. So, what we're going to be focusing on today is how you can really sell yourself in an interview to make sure you're the candidate they want to pick. So, your goal when you apply for the job is to present yourself as someone who has the potential to do the job well. And this means you need to explain your work and life experiences that are relevant to that job. And I won't lie, job interviews can be challenging. But when you're prepared and you have some really great answers ready and you have a positive attitude, you're setting yourself up for the greatest success. So let's say you have an interview at a local store. How would you dress? As we talk about some of these examples, I want you to go ahead and have out your resource that comes with this. So I'll go ahead and pull it up. But the resource that comes with this lesson, please go ahead and have that ready. And we're going to look first at, so it looks like this. We're going to actually scroll down to the very last page. And as we're talking, I want you to go ahead and in this interview etiquette, take notes on some of the things we're talking about so that you can save this and look back at it in the future. All right. So now that you have that document open, and if you don't yet, go ahead and press pause and pull it up. We're going to talk first about interview attire. So we know that applying for a job and going into an interview, we're going to dress differently than if we go to school. Here are some of the things that interviewers are going to look for when it comes to how you dress. You're going to want to wear nice, but not formal clothes. So something like collared shirts, especially if you are wearing a button down, it's a great look. Or really making sure that you're wearing a shirt that is not a tank top. Dark or khaki pants are recommended, but we're making sure that we're avoiding wearing any jeans, shorts, or too short of dresses or skirts. When I mean too short of dresses or skirts, I would say please make sure it at least passes your fingertips if you have your arm down next to your legs. Second, make sure you've got closed-toed shoes. That's a professional look. And then we're going to have clean clothes with no rips or tears. The interviewer is going to form an impression about you within the first 7 seconds of your interview. So this attire and some of our basic grooming tips are really going to help make sure you are dressing to impress. And when I mean grooming, it's those little things like making sure you don't forget to wear deodorant, having fresh breath, and having a clean face. So when it comes to behaving in an interview, how would you respond if you were interviewing me and I came in and I said, hey, I know I'm late or whatever. You should just hire me because I need the money and I'm cool. Well, hopefully you've got a few red flags there. I'm generally being unprofessional. One, I was late, using really casual speech, being rude, and I'm not letting the interviewer lead the interview. So you really want the interviewer to ask those questions. And sure, you can always ask questions too, but make sure they've said, do you have any questions for me? And we want to present ourselves as someone who would fit into the organization and not require close monitoring by a supervisor. So when it comes to presentation in an interview, first, we want to act and speak appropriately and clearly. Second, always make sure showing up on time. Early is on time when it comes to an interview. Even if you're there 5-10 minutes early and you're able to sit in the waiting room, they know that you took the time to make sure you weren't late. We want to make eye contact. That can be hard to really focus on looking at someone always in the eyes, especially when we're nervous, but it shows that you're listening and that you care. Next, shaking the interviewer's hand. Something during this time of COVID-19, if you're watching right now, that we might want to reconsider, but that's generally an expectation. Addressing the person as Mr. or Miss and their last name, unless they specifically tell you to use their first name. Just a sign of respect, err on the side of caution. We want to let the interviewer lead the conversation, like I mentioned before, and you want to listen carefully to the interviewer. I know, again, when we're nervous, it's hard to fully hone in, but they might ask you a question, and if you weren't listening to specific parts of it, it can make your reply not as excellent as it could be. We want to respond appropriately, taking a moment to gather your thoughts if needed. There's nothing wrong with counting for a few seconds and then answering a question. It's better to have a really well-prepared answer than to rush to a response. Next, we want to be honest. Please, please, please do not add any experience or jobs or past involvement to your answers that you haven't actually done, because they can often just pick up the phone and call to make sure you've done those things. So honesty is the best policy. And then finally, remember to smile. It's a good way to not seem nervous, and it makes you seem genuinely excited and interested in being there. All right. So we're going to go back to the resource that you have. And we're going to the second page, which is your brag sheet. I know you've probably been told it's not polite to brag, but when it comes to finding a job, you really need to promote yourself. So brag sheets are almost like a resume, but they're a way for you to prepare and think about all of the things that you have done if you're getting ready to apply for college or a job. So a brag sheet is a list of all of your life's accomplishments, your key experiences, your skills, and employment. So some of the things that you might be proud of, I want you to think, what is something like my parent or whoever I stay with, a teacher, a friend, what are the things that they're proud of me for having done? Those are the types of things you would want to make sure you highlight in an interview, and that will list on this brag sheet as a reminder. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and fill in this brag sheet now, and you can always go back to this and use it to really list out and prepare before an interview, so you have some examples ready. I'm going to fill in some just example activities as we go, but I want you to fill in for yourself as we go as well. So I'm just going to pretend like I'm a high school senior, and these are some things that a student could put. So one, if we're talking about academic classes and achievements, you can talk about your AP classes you've taken. If you've taken any AP classes, we could list our GPA. If you have a GPA over 3.5 or higher, it's really something great to highlight. You could talk about any really high test scores. You could talk, for example, about any academic awards. We could also talk about scholarships, maybe even perfect attendance. Those are all things we could draw from it on as examples. So again, GPA, I would really only stress this if it's a 3.5 or higher. That's because that shows that you've really, really excelled in academics. And if it's below a 3.5, that's okay. I know that you have other skills and experiences that would make you a good candidate for a job, but let's just leave that off. When it comes to extracurricular activities, that's experience in things like sports or the arts. So maybe you could say that you play that you're on a team, sports team, or you're in the chorus or the dance team. Maybe you're part of a religious organization. Maybe you're in Young Life Club. And then, let's see, we really want to focus on accomplishments and leadership positions within these things. So let's go back. If I'm on the sports team, I could say that I am the varsity lead. Or with Young Life, I could say I am the student organizer. And then maybe with the chorus, oh wait, I remember I got an award for chorus. So I could say I got an award to sing at a Jaguars game. I'm not saying that everyone will have experiences like this, but really think about, is there anything that you've done that sets you aside a little bit when you're working through some of these? And if you're on a sports team but you weren't in charge of the team, did you score a certain number of goals in a game? Or did you spend 2 years in chorus? Like, try to put some numbers behind it. And then when it comes to community service, so that's volunteering. So maybe you help at a food bank. So you can think about how you're at a food bank once a week, or maybe you volunteer at a daycare center. But again, we want to think about notable accomplishments and putting them in hours or awards. So maybe you only go to a food bank like once a year. Maybe we think about a specific situation that happened when you were at the food bank and what you learned. So maybe you're not ready to say that you won an award at a food bank, but you can talk about what you learned by being there. That follows you for the rest of your life. But if you do have a way to put it in a number and say, for example, 200 hours at a school, then list that. All right. I want you next to think about what your work experience is. Now, this is both paid and unpaid. What I mean by that is if you have put in work at your school, say you're an office aide, and no, you don't get paid for that, but it's extra responsibility beyond what is expected of you. But let's talk about like paid things. So I don't want you to limit it just to a regular job. Maybe you babysit or babysat before. Any summer jobs, think about part-time jobs. And I want you to always list the time that you've been there. So maybe for your part-time job, you can say you work 15 hours a week, however many hours you work, just so they get an understanding of how much you work. And again, if you don't have examples here that are often or that are exciting, at least think about how maybe that one time you babysat or those few times that you babysat, you could talk about what you learned from those. Like maybe you have a great story from it. Think about something that could really be inspiring or exciting to talk about in an interview that shows something great about you. Next, you want to think about your honors and awards. So they might not have fallen into one of these categories, but again, that's things like in the community, professional, academic, all that. Next, you want to think about if you have any notable personal experiences that you might want to tell an interviewer. So maybe it's something cultural, that the culture of your family is different than the culture where you go to school and how that impacts you and makes you strong. Or some kind of ceremony or experience you had and what you learned from it. It can be overcoming a challenge. We've all faced different situations, and if you don't have a professional example, you can always pull from your actual life. You can also talk about travel. If you traveled at all or you went somewhere, that could be really inspirational story. And then personal traits. So those are things about you that are just things that would be great to share as adjectives or phrases. So let's say you're good with children, or you're responsible. Whatever these personal traits are, make sure they're things that would be helpful in a specific job you're applying for. Like if you're applying for a job where you sort papers at an office and you don't interact with people, telling me that you're good with children is nice, but it's not something that's exactly going to help you as a person in that job. But if you're applying to work at a daycare and you're good with children, that's awesome. I'm definitely going to want to hear about it, so have some examples ready, but that would be perfect to talk about. And then future goals. So often in an interview, someone will tell you or will ask you, what do you see your career looking like in 5, 10 years? Being able to talk about what those goals are is so important, especially if asked a question like that. And maybe you don't have anything in mind right now, but this can encourage you to think about that. So really kind of push yourself to think, what are your academic? Do you want to go to school? Do you want to go to a training program? What are your professional goals? Do you want to own a business? Do you want to be a manager? Do you want to be a leader? Do you want to be a software engineer? Kind of tell us about some of your dreams when it comes to professions. And then personal. So that could be like, I want to be the youngest person to do something, whether it's I want to be the youngest person to start a charity in my community, or I want to be able to provide for a family. Whatever it is, just making sure that it's something that's meaningful to you. So I know that some of these areas are probably much easier for you to fill in than others, but it's something to keep thinking about as you get older, and to keep something like this, because as time goes along, you'll be able to add more work experience. All right. So moving on to actually getting into that interview. So you've practiced some of these, or you've listed out some of these things about yourself. Now you need to be prepared to talk about them. So before you go in, you need to review this list of skills and experience that you've had on your brag sheet so that you're able to highlight what makes you the right candidate for the position. When you prepare for interviews, you're always going to have to first learn about the company and anticipate any questions that they might be asking you to explain why you're great for the job. So if they put in the job description that you're going to have to work independently, expect that they're going to ask you a question about, can you work independently? And what does it look like when you work independently? So you'll go to your list of your brag sheet and say, okay, in any of these experiences, did I work by myself? Sure. You can say that you studied for your AP exams all on your own independently. You created your own plan, and then you got a 4 or 5 on the test. Whatever is going to help you to show that you're ready for that question via your brag sheet is going to help you prepare so much. And interviewers are always going to ask you to put your experience into context. For example, if you were to describe a challenge that you've had, you're going to have to say, this was the challenge, this is how I overcame it, and this is what I learned from the experience. So they want to know, what were you thinking as it was happening? How did you respond to it? And then what was the result? So for example, you can say, I was given a project. This is an example, something that happened to me. I was given a project and I wasn't given a lot of details on how to do it. So what I did was I asked my manager for a meeting on asking, what are the expectations of me? Can I make it up as I go? Do you need to see a draft of it before I finish it? And where do you want me to check in with you throughout the process? So that I don't make the whole project and then come to the end and find out that it's not something you wanted. And it turns out she was actually really glad I asked. And we laid out step by step when she wanted me to talk to her, and we made a timeline. And as a result, I got the project done on time, and our customers loved it. And it's now the most popular product we make. So we're talking about the specific challenge, how we overcame it, and then what we learned from it and how we're growing from that experience. So you're going to want to be able to tell stories like that for lots of different topics, because commonly in an interview, an interviewer will ask you about these 6 things. One is teamwork. Tell me about a time that you showed teamwork, and how did you grow from it, and what did it look like? How'd you overcome that? Talk to me about collaboration. Not only working on a team, but how lots of people work together to get to a great result. Working independently, like we talked about. Adapting to change. So how did something in your life change? How did you react to it? And then what does it look like now? Did it all turn up great? And then they're always going to ask you, for the most part, describe your strengths and your weaknesses. So how you figured out it was a strength and how you use it. So give me an example of a time in your life that you used that strength. And then a weakness. So a time that was a weakness, but always frame it as meeting and overcoming challenges. So I would never say, like, I am always bad about being on time. You can say instead, there was a time that I missed a deadline, but now I've overcome that by setting a deadline the week before, or something like that. So you're showing that you've worked to overcome that weakness. Okay, that was a lot. But I want to tell you about one very common first question that you should be prepared to answer. And that's always, tell me about yourself. It's a general question, and they just kind of want it as an introduction. And like we talked about, the interviewer loves those first few minutes of talking to you as the way to really make a decision about you often. So we want to give them the best possible explanation of ourselves. And what that's called is an elevator pitch. So that's the other resource that was attached for you. So I'm going to pull that up. I want you to pause this if you don't have it up, and go ahead and pull it up now. And it looks like this. All right, so elevator pitches are a great way to get people excited about all that you have to offer as a person. Companies use it, but people also use them when they're in interviews. So what I want you to do is you're going to brainstorm your own elevator pitch. Think about answers to the following questions to help you prepare some possible ideas for your elevator pitch. So, what matters to you? What are you good at? What do you have to offer a potential employer? What interests you? What do you want to be remembered for doing? If you asked a friend, how would she or he describe you? And what is one thing people should know about you? Also have a dream job in mind. So yes, it's great to talk about yourself, but also keep what the job is in mind so that the things you talk about are also things that would make you good at that job. Now, once you think about those questions, I want you to try your best to come up with a very brief presentation that you would use to talk about yourself. Let's say that you have a classmate's parent who is hiring for your dream job. And if you could get that job, you need to be able to briefly talk about what it is that makes you unique for that job. So before you get started, I'll give you my example. My name is Carly Norton, and I am passionate about all students having access to a great education. I bring 7 years of teaching and operations experience to the table. I have been successful in helping schools and students excel because I am focused on building strong relationships, and I'm a detailed project planner. And I'd love to tell you more about why I am a great candidate for this position. Now, assuming I was applying for a job in education, that's a great way for me to say I have the passion, it matters to me. I talked about some of the skills that I have, the things that I'm good at, and I talked a little bit about my experience. And sure, you're not going to have that amount of work experience, but you can still talk about why maybe one day you would love to be a software engineer because you love numbers or you love working on the computer and that you love staying focused on projects. So now's the time that I'll say press pause, and I want you to draft your elevator pitch. I would say plan to make it about 4 or 5 sentences. And while that seems tough, go ahead and get started. It's going to be your best attempt, and take about 5 to 10 minutes to draft it. When you're done, go ahead and press play on the video and we'll wrap up. All right, if you're listening right now, that means you have already pressed pause and now pressed play, and you're ready to rejoin us to wrap up after your elevator pitch. So in summary, your personal, academic, and work experience come together to make you the person you are. No matter what job you apply for, you surely have something in your background that makes you a strong candidate. Before you sit down for the interview, think about your strengths, your skills, and what you love doing, and compare them to the job so that you can tell the interviewer why you're the right person. Best of luck as you apply for your first jobs, and have a good day.